Hi guys, Sarah here from Highland Haven Australian Shepherds and Highland Haven Dog Training, and welcome to episode 5 of season 2 of Dog for Thought. Joining me is my co-host, daughter, and dog trainer extraordinaire, Sophie.
Hi everyone.
What's going on, Sophie? Give us an update in Dogland. What's been going on this week?
Nothing super crazy. I mean,
are you crazy?
Yeah.
Are you insane?
Yeah, no.
Have you not been existing in this household?
No, and it was like yesterday too. Okay, maybe a little crazy.
So we showed the house for a few days.
Yep.
So we've already have a signed contract on our new house, which we're super excited about. Mm-hmm. It's just a couple towns over, so not far from here. And we put our house on the market last week. We talked about that briefly in last episode about how the dogs went to Gary's stepmom's house, and she helped us keep them out of the house so we could show the house. So we did, I think, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday also.
And Monday, yeah.
We then accepted an offer on Tuesday, and we were in contract by Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a...
Crazy
I'm not
day.
sure you really understand the magnitude of that.
Well, I feel like the last time we moved, first of all, I was in school, and second of all, it was like a phone call of just like, oh yeah, everything's done. And I was like, okay. And then we just moved into the next house. So what do I know?
Yeah. So we have a signed contract on the sale of this house. We have a contract on the house that we bought. So now it's just sort of 6 weeks or so to close on the new house, and then about 8 weeks to close on this house. And we'll be moving. So yeah, it was a crazy week.
Yeah.
And the dogs were exhausted.
Yep, we were exhausted.
But
they did great.
We made it through. It was tough, but we made it through. Other than that, we haven't had too much going on because that's completely consumed every spare moment. Today we're going to talk about anxiety, anxiety behaviors in dogs. So separation anxiety, general anxiety disorders, and why they're so sort of widespread and seem to be so common.
Yep.
So let's get started. So anxiety is a really, really common, I don't want to say complaint, but it is. It's a complaint from our clients, right? We get it. That's when they're filling out the form, inquiring about dog training. Anxiety and anxiety-like behaviors that they describe are really super common. Because a dog that has anxiety is a dog that's generally difficult to live with.
Yep.
It's not just the behaviors that make it hard, right? Whether it be separation anxiety or barking or whining or
Pacing
or destructive behavior, any of those types of things, which are just hard to live with in general. It's also painful to watch your dog suffer. You see your dog and you're like, dude, if you could just chill out, life is good. And you look at your dog, you feel bad for them and you want to help them. And so they reach out for training.
Yep.
Many times people don't realize the behaviors that they're dealing with have their base in anxiety.
Yep.
And, we just deal a lot with that.
It's like pretty much looking past all the anxiety, all the things that their owner tells us is like, he barks in the crate and he barks at the window and he paces around. He can't settle when we're watching TV. It's like digging through all that stuff to get to like the root of the problem, to be like, it's actually because of this. And then being like, okay, well, let's create a routine about like, let's manage this behavior and then create a routine on how to go about it. And usually like, it's just a lack of communication between you and the dog of like, this is the time we turn off. This is the time we do this. And once you create structure and like understanding of like, this is what I want from you right now, and this is how you settle down, usually we can dimmer it enough or eliminate it.
Yeah. So, the ultimate goal is to help the dog self-regulate, right? And we've talked about self-regulation a lot in previous episodes. So that is always our goal. In order to get there, there's some foundational stuff we have to work with when dogs come in as training dogs with anxiety.
And I think a lot of it starts with like, what kind of breed are we dealing with, right? And so getting the root of like, what kind of dog is this? Because some dogs are more prone to anxiety compared to other dogs. So an example would be like a GSP is going to be much more likely to be anxious than a
Bulldog?
a bulldog. Yeah, exactly. And so we need to understand the breed, understand their tendencies, understand what the breed needs. And then from there, we can be like, okay, what's the behavioral issue? And then how are they being guided?
So we could talk a little bit about why certain breeds are anxious, like why it's in their bloodlines. My guess is that generally high energy dogs correlate with anxiety, right? They have a lot of energy. They don't know where to put it.
They have a lot of thoughts and they don't know where to put it.
Right. Highly intelligent dogs think a lot and they overthink a lot. And we've sort of developed them to be extremely observant. So the herding group as a group tends to be pretty anxious.
Yep.
Right. Because, we've bred them to be hypervigilant. Right. And then that hypervigilance in the typical suburban home looks very different than on a ranch in Montana.
Yep.
Right. So breed wise, that's where it can come from. Generally, like a bulldog or a basset hound or these kind of layabout type of calmer dogs. Not that they can't be anxious, but generally as breeds, we don't see it. There's not a lot of thought going on between those ears in some of those breeds. And that's, again, on purpose. They were bred for a very specific role, and that didn't require what we would consider intelligence. It's a different form of intelligence.
In my opinion, it's like everyone's like, oh, I really want a smart dog. No, you don't. No, you do not. I have the smartest dog in the house, and I was like, I want a smart dog. I want to work with her. I want to do all this stuff. And yeah, I do a lot of stuff with her. A lot of stuff. And the average person who has a family, has a life, you can't do that. I'm a trainer. This is what I do. This is what type of dog I want. And even then, sometimes I'm just like, please go lay down. Please stop barking at the TV. Because she sees another dog on TV, or now it's like video games. She doesn't like how I play video games and I attack people in the video games. She wants to help me attack people on the video games because she's so observant of things. It's crazy. Most dogs don't even know that the TV works.
Many dogs can stare straight at the TV and it doesn't compute.
Yeah, at all.
And there's plenty of dogs who do respond to dogs on TV and stuff like that. So that's one place that anxiety comes from, right? A hardwiring from the breed. But also you can breed dogs together from a breed that otherwise isn't known for being particularly anxious, but individually. There's always individuals within the breed. You breed two dogs that are anxious together, and you're going to create puppies that are anxious.
Yep.
Right? So we're very careful when we breed our Aussies that one of the two is super mellow.
Yep.
Right? So Journey is super hyper vigilant. We've discussed that lots. So we bred her with Ty because he's Mr. Chill.
Yep.
Mr. Calm, cool, and collected. And her puppies came out, their anxiety and hypervigilance vigilance is way, way down, below medium.
Mm-hmm. Especially,
which was wonderful.
And, if we talk about Journey's, when Journey explodes, it gets anxious and does a behavior that she's not supposed to do. It takes a really long time for her to come back down to homeostasis. When we bred her with Ty, we've had a lot of experience with this litter for whatever reason. I've noticed that all of her puppies have a very quick bounce back. So when they do react, it's pretty quick bounce back compared to Journey, which takes hours to bounce back. Their bounce back is maximum 20 minutes, maybe even quicker. Evie bounces back in 2 seconds.
Right.
So,
and that's important information for us to know, because the first litter with a bitch, it's always a crapshoot.
Yep.
You want to see what she produces, and an ethical breeder then makes decisions going forward on whether they're going to continue to breed her or not based on what she produced and what you thought she would produce, right?
Yep.
So I was actually more pleased than I thought I'd be with Journey's puppies. I think they've turned out fantastic. From two different very sweet, mellow guys. She has these I guess there's about 9 puppies she has over 2 litters that have been great. So we'll continue to work to breed her and work in sweet sires for her. Mm-hmm. So that is, she has sort of a double whammy, right? So Aussies are prone to anxiety. And then she has a personality that's prone to hypervigilance.
Yep.
So an overactive amygdala, which is where this all comes from in the brain, right? Oops, humans and dogs. So you can have a double whammy there, or you can have a super mellow dog who, again, was bred, two parents are anxious in that breed, and then you're producing bloodlines that are more anxious in a breed that shouldn't have that.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we talk about like Meadow is kind of a great example. Is I feel like she has anxious tendencies, but I don't know if it's nowhere near the same as like Journey.
Yeah, so I think Meadow is quick to trigger to noise. She definitely has higher energy. She probably, out of all the dogs in the house, she's the top one or two as far as drive. She has a ton of drive. Gets that from her dad. Mm-hmm. Her mom is Remy. Her mom is I don't think Remy's a particularly anxious dog. She can be a little triggery, but like pretty much average, I think, for an Aussie.
She gets like into habits. Like I wouldn't say it's like trigger. It's like they're quick to create a habit, and then once they're in the habit, it's really hard for them to break that habit.
Yeah.
So I think that's another interesting perspective of anxiety. Is not saying Meadow isn't intelligent, but I think it comes from like a habit of just like chewing your nails. It's like a habit.
Yeah, I think Meadow's anxiety really comes from drive. I'll be honest.
Okay.
I don't think it really is she's not a particularly anxious dog. I think she's a high drive dog.
Yeah, she just has a lot of drive.
Yep. And she's 8 years old now, and you would never know it. She she acts like a 1 or 2 year old puppy.
Yeah.
She's kind of just super high drive.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we're kind of being too specific here. We need to sort of
make it more broad.
Yeah, we need to broaden what we're talking about here. So we get a lot of people who come in with dogs with anxiety. I mean, people don't want to hear us talk ad nauseum about our specific dogs. Let's talk about anxiety in general and what we see in the dogs that come to us for treatment, so to speak. So the first thing we generally do, what we do with all dogs here, is we work on obedience. Because if you don't have a common language, you can't communicate with you. You can't tell your dog what you want it to do in a situation, right? So they have to learn, what sit and down, is. And stay, although we don't actually use the word stay, once they're in a command, we expect them to stay there. We're working on impulse control. Again, you can't treat anxiety if you don't work on impulse control.
Yep.
Right? Because you can teach your dog everything you want it to do. But if they don't have the foundational impulse control, they can't perform whatever you're asking them to do in a situation that's high stress, right? Which is what, no situation is low stress when they're anxious. That's the whole point, right? It's a situation that's causing them stress. So that's where we need to start with them. We need to implement understanding of some basic commands, and we need to work on impulse control. And that's true for all dogs that come in. Right. That's where we start with all dogs.
And I think
come in here.
Like talking about that is a new client that comes in and you're like, oh, well, how are you going to change anxiety with using sit and impulse control? One of the first things we do is dogs aren't allowed to just come right out of the kennel because that creates anxious because they know that they're going to go on a walk or they know they're going to be able to do something fun. So immediately they're all over the place and they're in it and they're so excited that you're there and all this stuff.
And you're reinforcing that excitement.
Exactly. And then that can kind of fall out into anxiety. And predicting things that might not happen. So we need to create a way of communicating, right? So the first thing I do is I stand in front of the kennel door until they give me a behavior I'm looking for, which is sitting. I don't care if you lay down. I don't care if you sit. You just have to do a command. I'm not really going to tell you what the command is because I don't know you that well. I don't know if you know sit or down or whatever. This is the first time I'm meeting the dog, the first time I'm letting them out of the kennel. I'm just going to wait until they give me some sort of behavior that I find.
Some sort of place behavior.
Some sort of place
sitting
behavior.
still or laying down.
Yes.
Right.
And then once I'm going to open the kennel door, they get excited again.
They're going to jump up
and go all over the place. I shut the door again. And so that is like the first introduction I have with the dogs.
And, depending on the dog, that can take 20 minutes.
Yeah, it could take the entire time they're supposed to be out with us, which means it's an hour later. Okay, you finally sat down. I'm going to put a leash on you and you're going to go pee and then you're going to go back in the kennel because...
Yeah, that's rare, but it can happen. Most of the time they figure it out in under 10 minutes.
Yep.
And then they have somewhat of an understanding next time you're asking them that. So, in other words, what you're saying is we're not going to reinforce the super high energy excitement they have when they see someone come to release them from their kennel, from the crate at home. Their crate at home or their kennel here, right? Because if we let them out and give them what they want, which is let them out, right? You're reinforcing this very high energy state. So that's the first thing we do. We look for calm states and we start reinforcing that from the beginning. And again, what does that teach the dog? It teaches them to self-regulate.
Yep.
It teaches them to go from a very excited state to a calm state to get what they want. So it teaches them to go from high to low, high to low, high to low. And that kind of practice every single day, multiple times a day when they're here with us, teaches them self-regulation. It's just one of the ways that working obedience, essentially, teaches self-regulation. And then that bleeds into things like regulating emotions and anxiety. So that's one of the things we do.
One of the things, yep.
So they come out, they're calm. And we then, when we send them home with instructions about departing from any crate. Same thing. When you come home, it's natural for them to be excited. Mm-hmm. It is. It's natural for them to be excited. But we have to sort of suck it up and wait for calmness and reinforce that instead. Because that just sets up a calm dog leaving their crate. And therefore a dog who's much more able to listen and behave.
And then that overflows into other things, right? So we always go home, the whole go home lesson, we're like, okay, so like that's your homework. You know, if you do these little things throughout the day, it's going to add up to what your homework is. And so having them sit before giving them their food and having them wait and then releasing them so they can eat, that's working on impulse control. Having them sit before going out the door when you're taking them on a walk, that's working on impulse control. So it's just little things here and there that as long as you're frequently using that muscle, it's going to help them be able to like hold themselves together when they're really excited about something.
Right. So we can't expect them to suddenly be calm in a super excited situation if we don't work on calmness every day. Mm-hmm. Every day. And the best way a human being can do that, the biggest probability of our clients doing that is to work it into everyday life. So you don't really feel like you're training.
It's like muscle memory. Right. You just, and I think that's the hardest part of like us trying to explain like what we do, because for you and me, it's muscle memory. I don't really think about, let me just let this dog out of the kennel. Like I'm always just like, no, that was like totally inappropriate. Like get back in there, try again, because that's what we do on a day-to-day basis with our own dogs. Mm-hmm. So.
Right. So that's one way we work on impulse control. Mm-hmm. We do take them for walks the very first, depending on what time they arrive. Usually the first day they're here, they go on their first walk. And not pulling on the leash is another really hard thing for most dogs to do. Most dogs that come to us are on harnesses. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing we take off and send home with the client. We won't be needing this because there is no control in a harness. We put them on a collar and we start doing leash walking with them, and we don't allow pulling. We just don't, for multiple reasons. But again, we're reinforcing them controlling their impulses. When they see something, when there's a car, another dog, or a bike, or just something that they want to smell, right?
Yeah, like a little leaf blowing in the wind. They're like, oh, I need that leaf now. And it's like, okay, you're going to be a huge dog one day. You can't be running after leaves.
Right. And I mean, we have an advantage in that part of the reason we start on training right away with them is that we have a new relationship. They don't know us.
Nope.
So they're already a little bit unsure, right? So we have sort of the advantage to sort of under the radar start inserting these new requests. And many times these requests take no, commands. It's just simply waiting for a behavior that we want and then reinforcing that. But because the dog is in a state where they're unsure, in a strange place with strange people, they're sort of not acting normally, not acting like they would at home, right? Super comfortable and acting like a fool. They might still be acting foolish, but not to the degree they would be with their own owner in their own home. Mm-hmm. So we use that to slip in under the radar and start asking for behaviors that we want. Mm-hmm. And they don't even realize what we're doing. And It takes no correction. because it is simply waiting for the reward. They're not getting what they want until they give us an appropriate behavior. And they have to figure that out. And many times when dogs come to us, their brain is just like all these cobwebs, especially when they're older.
Yep.
But puppies to some extent as well, but particularly older dogs, their brain is in recess and it's just full of cobwebs. This is how I always sort of picture it in my head. And it's our job to go in there with a broom and start cleaning up, getting all those cobwebs out of there and lighting up their brain. So they start to think, oh, my behavior gets me something. I have to think about what I want and figure out what I need to do for her to give it to me, rather than I'm just acting like a fool and following every impulse and jumping around like a maniac. And eventually I get what I want, because behavior like that turns into anxiety because they don't really see the one-to-one correlation. They don't feel in control. They're just sort of throwing spaghetti up against a wall and seeing what sticks. Once they start to figure out, oh, I know how to get what I want, I do this.
I sit down.
Mom is happy when I do it and I get what I want. Oh, well, that feels so much better. And then you start to see the anxiety come down because you clarify their world. The dogs that come in to us with anxiety are generally confused.
Yeah. Yeah.
They generally don't know what is expected of them from the people in their lives, and not from lack of trying.
Yep.
Because most dogs that come to us have people that do the most, like you say, right? And you're always saying, do less.
Do less. Do less. And especially like if your dog's your world and you're like, I just try all these things and I don't know why he's not doing this. Do less.
Yeah. I take him on a 2-hour walk. Then I come back. And then in the afternoon, he goes to the dog park for an hour. And he's still all over the place. Well,
do less.
Yeah, he is. Because you're lighting up all of that drive and you're not giving him any direction or instruction. And he's just, working that energy muscle rather than working that calmness muscle. Right. So a dog who is, I think we've talked about this before, a dog who is naturally high drive, we already know where their strengths are.
That's a strength of theirs.
We don't need to work on that. For a dog that's high drive, we need to work on calmness.
Yep.
For a dog who is, and we can talk about how lack of confidence causes anxiety. A dog that's not confident, once we then clear up what we're asking, so we start with an obedience protocol, right? Teaching them sitting down and teaching them the concept of sitting still until released kind of thing. Then the next thing we do is start working on their confidence.
So once you build that foundation of relationship of like, okay, you need to sit before coming out of the kennel, you need to sit before going in the car, you need to do this. And then they're like, okay, if I do this, then, then we're a team, right? Because then we're working back and forth and problem solving together. And I'm not getting mad. I'm not getting emotional. It's very like cut and dry, like, yes, this is what I want. Good job. Then my favorite part comes in, which is confidence building. Then we go to a playground.
Yeah, kids playground.
And a kids playground with no kids on it, obviously. And we make them just jump on and off equipment. Like, especially stuff when you, like, is obviously we're not going to make them do crazy stuff that we know they can't do, but things that they can do, like, walk across the shaky drawbridge. Like, trust me, you're going to be able to do this.
And when you say make it, we don't require them to do this.
No.
This is all treat based,
yeah.
Right? Because we can't discipline fearlessness. It has to come from a place of trust. And at this point, it's purely, do you want this cookie? Come on, you can do it. And I agree with you. That's my favorite part. When a dog does something because you've asked them to do it and they're not sure they can do it, but you know they can. And it's not dangerous. They just feel it is. And you lure them across that drawbridge with some cookies and they do it and they get on the other side.
And they're like, let's do it again. Let's do it again.
The look on their face is just priceless. It is my favorite thing.
Yeah.
To see them start understanding that, hey, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that's going to hurt you. I'm not asking you to do anything that I know you can't do. And just trust me. And you're going to get cookies while you're doing it. And then it's going to start feeling really, really good.
And then it's like when they're starting to be anxious about, let's say they're reactive and they're anxious about seeing new dogs and not knowing if they're going to have to meet them or not meet them or what's going to happen, because I feel like a lot of reactivity kind of comes from this anxiety of like, what's going to happen. when they start to realize that, no, I'm never going to introduce you to a dog on leash. That's
that's just not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
You don't have to worry about it because we're not doing it.
We're not doing it. And secondly, you're going to get food and I'm going to give you as much space as you need. Then they start to trust, and it starts to become like this relationship of understanding, of looking at you for reassurance and being like, you're fine. You're fine. We're just going to walk around. Don't worry about it. And then that's when the anxiety starts to dissipate, of being like, oh, this is what you want from me. I trust you.
You're going to make sure I have a safe space.
Exactly.
And then the anxiety comes down. Now we could talk about Nikki, who's here right now.
Yeah.
So Nikki, we believe, although she has not been DNA tested, we believe she looks like a little Roddy. She looks small. She's small, but she has like Roddy coloring, short hair.
Like a houndy Roddy kind of.
But I think she acts most like a cattle dog.
Yeah.
She's kind of the size of a cattle dog, maybe a large cattle dog. She definitely has personality traits that I would associate with cattle dog. She is very smart. She is sweet but not overly affectionate. She loves to get pets, but she's not going to be in your face begging for you to give
or like
her
in your
attention.
lap.
She has a lot of dignity.
Yeah.
She has a lot of pride and dignity, that dog. She's a real partner. She really does want to work with you, but she is leash reactive and she lives in the city. So we've been working on that. I never know whether the reactivity comes from a place of fear or from a place of breed associated behaviors that loop, right?
Yep.
So I think as time has gone on, I have decided that that's really breed based with her, right? And it's a feel good loop for her, sort of exploding and yelling at that dog who's walking by. And she generally does it. It makes sense. She generally does it when she sees dogs that are exuding a lot of energy, right? Energy that she's not comfortable with. Either they're anxious or they're super excited, or they're reacting. They're reacting on their leash in an aggressive manner. That's when she's going to react, because she wants to go control them. Because she finds other dogs, when they don't follow the rules as she is deemed, she finds that dysregulating, right? So her instinct is what I believe is cattle dog in her. Her instinct is, let me go correct that dog and tell him to calm the F down because it's upsetting me. Yep. Right? I can relate to this because when you or Jacob are having a bad day, or something's happened to you, it's almost like first of all, it makes a parent dysregulated when their child is upset, and it's very tempting to say, don't feel that way. Yeah. Stop feeling that way. It's okay. Stop crying. Stop being angry. Stop being so angry. Stop venting, because it makes me dysregulated because I want things to go well for you and want you to be happy. And I have to actively work on not being a cattle dog and telling you to calm down and stop feeling the way you feel, because you're making me feel right. So that's been a process with Nikki, creating a management plan around her reactivity so that she feels like she's comfortable and feels safe and understands that I don't want her to correct that dog. And if she chooses the alternate behavior, which is to sort of look at me and ignore that dog, she's going to get reinforced and rewarded for that. Yep. And she's willing to do that. So she's kind of an unusual case in reactivity. That's not usually a confident. She's almost like a confident reactive dog. Yeah, yeah. It's, although anxiety can be fear-based, right? It does cause her anxiety, but for different reasons. Yeah. So for her, we have to give her an alternative behavior that we like, that she understands. So it was taking the time to teach her the behavior that I want and what she gets for it when she does it well. Yep. And that I do not want that other behavior. So when you're starting to get anxious, I am going to give you a leash correction and go, And then I'm going to go, remember what we do? Good girl. Cookie, cookie, cookie when you behave. So kind of giving her a behavior interrupter. No, that's not what we're doing. We're doing this. And then rewarding that good behavior.
And then over time, that muscle will be used. The more you do
because
then she won't even become, like, she won't even react anymore. The more consistent you are, the more that muscle's used, the more the other pathway that was created will be overgrown, and they won't use that pathway anymore. Right. Which is why we always talk as trainers, consistency, consistency, consistency. The more consistent you are, the less that other behavior will even exist anymore, because it becomes like this muscle memory habit.
Right. So it's literally a neural pathway in the brain.
Yeah.
Behavioral loop, that's a neural pathway in the brain, like a worn path in a meadow of grass, right? And so, of course, you're going to walk on that pathway. Of course, it's because it's the easiest. You're not, tramping through giant overgrown grass and bugs and all kinds of things. You're going to go on that pathway. But we're asking you to not do that. We're asking you to go this way. And it takes a while to create that new pathway and let that old pathway, neural pathway, grow over and die, essentially, right? Atrophy. And now we're going to go on this new pathway.
I like, people always say old dogs can't learn new tricks. It's not about that. It's about they have a very embedded pathway. And let's say that pathway for this dog, they've done it thousands of times.
Right.
Now I have to counter that by being consistent over 1,000 times with this dog to create a new pathway, which is why it's in a way harder to train older dogs because they've
had longer to learn that.
It's that muscle is so used to being used that we have to start using this dull muscle that doesn't work at all because they've had so much time to use this other muscle.
Right.
Which is why you see a behavior you don't like, you don't know what to do about it. Go ask for a trainer before you can't handle it anymore. And now it's an embedded behavior.
It just takes longer for them to learn it. It's just harder on everybody all around.
Yeah, it is.
So the listeners might be listening to this at this point going, "What? I thought we were talking about anxiety. Why are we talking about training?" Because it's all connected. Right? Anxiety comes from not being able to predict the future. Dogs love predictability. They love to be able to predict what the next thing is they're going to do in their day, which is why we're big believers in a structured day for a dog. A predictable day. She comes home, she waits until I'm calm, lets me out of the crate. Then I go and sit by the door. Then she puts my leash on. Then we go outside for a walk. Those predictable things help take a super intelligent, anxious dog and make them feel more comfortable. And it naturally eliminates or diminishes the anxiety. And people don't really think of it that way. What they do is they come to us and they drop off a dog who is on 3 or 4 anti-anxiety medications, right? And they give us this whole list of this. She gets 2 pills at this time of day, and then at lunch she gets this pill, and then at dinner she gets 2 more of these pills. And I'm like, how's that working for you? How is it working for you? All that pharmacology.
Well, she still does these behaviors, but she just sleeps a lot now. So you don't really have a dog.
And we're looking at a dog whose pupils are dilated and
staring into space.
And they're like totally checked out because they're so drugged up. And I don't blame the people for doing that because they're trying to help. There are rare situations where a little bit of medication does work, right? For a dog who's just poorly bred, perhaps, right? Who does have like a severe anxiety disorder, you still need to do all of the things we're talking about.
It just takes the edge off a little bit.
But most of the dogs that come to us, the first thing we do when they say they're on medication is say, well, if we stop giving the medication, is that going to be a problem? Because some medication, you do need to wean them off slowly because it's so powerful. Other medication clients are just giving when needed as necessary. So first thing we have to do is get permission to start either cold turkey or start weaning them off the medication. And that's sort of vet approved so that we don't endanger the dog's health, right? That's the first thing we do.
Yeah.
Because as trainers, first of all, we can't treat a dog when we're not seeing the real dog. We can't treat a drugged up dog because we don't know what we're really seeing.
We could talk about my girl.
We can talk about Maisie.
Yeah, my girl. So Maisie came to us with, I would have to say she was probably the worst anxiety-filled dog I've ever seen in my entire life.
She was a super severe. Anxious girl. And she came on a couple of different medications.
Yep. And that was we had a long conversation with her parents being like, how can we start weaning this off? And we got her off of all the medication except for one.
Yeah. The more powerful stuff they wanted to wait on.
Yeah.
And that's, I understand that. They wanted to wait on that. They didn't feel comfortable, but they did wean her off of that. I think she's still on some mild.
She's on some very mild stuff, but like not as nearly as high dose as she was. Anyways, she was so severe that you could not touch her
without her screaming.
You would touch her and like just barely put your hands on her, and she would scream bloody murder and pee all over the place. And So I started touching her more.
Yeah.
And it took a really long time. Luckily, she was not a biter. She just peed everywhere. So it was a lot of just cleaning up piss and giving her a bath and cleaning up piss. And her learning that you screaming and throwing a tantrum for me touching you when I'm not hurting you whatsoever is not going to get you anywhere.
Right. And many times dogs, when they're as severe as Maisie was, have already escalated to biting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And many times that kind of biting is a behavior to get you to stop. You know, it's a behavior that's escalated to the point where it's getting you to stop doing what you want to do.
I'm so anxious that...
How do I get you to stop doing
how do I
this?
get you to stop?
If I need to bite you, to get you to stop it. And then they learn the art of biting.
Yep.
And that's a whole other ball of wax. And very sad to see, because usually it's taken years to get to that point. And if it's a big, powerful dog, they've already been behaviorally euthanized.
Bite history at this point.
They're already done.
So...
So continue about Maisie.
So it was me just going down there and just watching TV with her and just touching her all the time until she was just like, oh, me doing this behavior, I don't get anything from it. And then from that, it was, walking on leash. If she stopped on leash, she would start screaming on the ground and you would be like, no, we're walking right now. So like everything we did, we really had to do at home. Like we couldn't really take her out because it looked like we were extremely abusing this dog when she was just screaming at everything. And over time, once we started gaining her trust and we got through, all the screaming and peeing and anal glands, we started to see this little cute little dog come out.
A sweet, adorable dog who really just wanted to do what you asked her to do.
And had no confidence whatsoever at all.
Yeah.
I mean, noise, and she lived in Brooklyn. Like they lived deep in Brooklyn. So she couldn't go outside. They couldn't walk around the leash. Noise scared her. People scared her. Sounds scared. I mean, everything scared this dog. Cars, that like stopping buses and stuff, which is all around you in New York City. Right. And so we just started taking her to new places. We took her to like Cold Spring and walked her around cars and people. And I got her to go on the playground, and I would make her jump on rocks and jump in my arms and jump on the chair. And everything I was doing, I was just like, how can we get through this together? Like, how are we going to be able to get confident enough for you to do this together? Mm-hmm. And then over time, I was able to brush her, which they couldn't brush her. They couldn't do her nails. Mm-hmm. I was able to do her nails and brush her. And so we went from this dog who was like not confident at all. She couldn't be around other dogs, couldn't play with other dogs, couldn't do anything. To now she comes back for boarding and she walks upstairs into our giant pack of dogs and it's just like, hi, everyone. Excuse me, coming through. Just like no big deal.
Yeah. I mean, she still is a jumpy dog.
Mm-hmm. She's still spooky, but that's Aussies, right? So
and that's her, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. When you hear the tss of the garbage truck and you spook, that's fine. Yeah. But we're gonna keep walking.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at you and reassure you with my voice, but we're gonna keep walking.
Yep.
And what they learn is that melting down doesn't get them what they want anymore, but being brave and walking through things. And I trust you that I'm not going to get hurt, does get me what I want.
And it feels good.
And it feels way better.
Way better than dropping your anal glands every 10 seconds.
Yeah. No, she was a fun dog to work with because her progress was so clear,
Yeah, very fast.
Yeah. It was really dramatic from start to finish. And those are always the most satisfying. It's the subtle ones that it's not that they're not satisfying. It's that sometimes especially since we're with them every day for 3 weeks. So we don't always see the progress because it's so gradual and so subtle. And you have to sort of remind yourself of where they started when they first arrived. Oh, right. He couldn't even lay down at night. And now he's laying down chewing a bone. So we could talk about go lay down.
Yep.
That's another big one.
Yep.
So we, of course, work on your basic commands like we talked about. We work on basic manners. We work on impulse control. In lots of ways around those commands.
Confidence building.
The other thing we talk about, and we've talked about this before, is a good off switch. We've talked about this, 2 episodes ago, and how important that is. An off switch is impulse control.
Yep.
It's self-regulation. And it is the only command that we encourage people to use over and over again, almost like a nagging thing. You just continue to say, go lay down, go lay down, go lay down, until your dog complies. Because sometimes the self-regulation takes a little bit. It takes them a little bit to sort of wind down to the point where they can find something to chew appropriately and settle in a spot in your room and relax. Super important quality of life skill like we talked about.
Yep.
But it also is teaching self-regulation, which is anxiety, which is the anti-anxiety, right?
And I think this also kind of spans from a lot of like dogs that are naturally barking, like they're in their crate and they're just like "Ah, rah, 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 rah," and that kind of anxiety is once you teach them how to like go lay down, they're just like, oh, there's an alternate behavior that I should be doing in the crate. Yeah.
Right.
You could go lay down and not like bark every 10 seconds. And then they're like, oh, this feels so much better than to be barking.
And I think the mistake people make with barking is that people think that barking releases energy, right? But it actually doesn't. It actually creates energy, right? So that's, there's 50 different reasons why you would want to prevent nuisance barking, right? The biggest being you want to stay in your apartment. Yeah. You want your neighbors to like you.
You want to be able to hear when you're older.
Yeah. You want your spouse to not leave you.
Yeah.
Right? So the nuisance barking is important, certainly for quality of life, prevention of nuisance barking. But also it is, it can start as anxiety, and turn into nuisance barking. It can start with barking and create anxiety. It's like this cycle.
Yeah.
Right.
It goes full
feeds
circle.
the anxiety.
Yeah, it really
If it doesn't
does.
start with anxiety, it's going to create it, right? Because it's constantly sort of refiring that amygdala, right? That alarm, that hypervigilance sort of amygdala keeps being refired by the barking. So we definitely want, and again, if you can't ask your dog to not bark if you haven't worked on any kind of impulse control practice, right? You can't ask them to control their impulses if you've never practiced it.
Yeah, let's say you never practice it, and the first thing you do is shut up, go lay down. Now you're yelling at them and chasing them around the room and stuff like that. Now it's firing even more, and now they're barking even more because that's the only way they can release energy. So then it gets worse, and they're not knowing what to do, and they're like, oh, I guess this is what we're supposed to do. We're just supposed to yell with each other, and so it's like doing, once again, do less,
Right.
do less, people.
And be less tolerant of the nuisance
Yep.
barking. Now, again, we need to work on foundational impulse control and then work on a management plan around barking. It's normal for little dogs to be very barky. And you have to understand that. But we have to have sort of an endpoint. We have to teach enough, right? And then ask for a different behavior. Invite them over to the couch to sit with you, or do 5 minutes of obedience, or one of 50 different things.
An alternate behavior.
We have to introduce an alternate behavior or option for them, right? So we can then redirect them from that nuisance barking.
Great example is Meadow. Meadow, like once Meadow gets into a loop, she can't stop barking. It like literally can't help it. And the more you get upset, the more she starts barking. So we have a whole routine on like go lay down and be quiet, and giving her alternate behavior to do,
and she also wears the bark collar.
And the bark collar, yeah. So that helps.
So
a lot too.
When she gets super triggered, then she's going to be barking at every sound outside.
Yeah, a bird, a squirrel, a rustle.
It's just she just gets hyper vigilant, and she literally can't help it.
Yep.
So when you put the bark collar on, it vibrates every time she barks, more than like 2 or 3 times in a row. So it won't vibrate on the first bark, but if she continues to bark, it's going to start vibrating, and that's enough to remind her, oh yeah, I'm not doing that. And it's, since it's a 1-to-1 thing, it's related to the actual vibration of her vocal cords. It's timed correctly, and it gets her to go, oh, right. And she's able to then control her barking enough so that the upside down beaker has time to drain, right? And we talked about that.
By the way, to those people who are like, oh, I'm just going to go out and get a bark collar and fix the problem, there needs to be a basis of understanding of, no, was you're pairing that with the collar. No, go lay down.
Right.
If they
and
don't have a
basis, collars
basis
out there, and you want to make sure that you get a good one. We generally use Garmin products. So the bark collar will go on when she gets super triggered, and it literally helps her self-regulate.
Yeah.
It really helps her get over the hump and chill out. And then we take the bark collar off, because now she's back to homeostasis, and she can then she's out of lizard brain and sort of is checked back in and can self-regulate.
And she's allowed to bark. It's just the every little inch of everything.
You know when she's not allowed to bark? At 3 a.m. Sorry, she's not allowed to bark.
I don't blame you then. But like my point is it's normal for them to tell you that Amazon's at the door.
But it's extreme.
Yeah. And then when you say, hey, quiet, they should all be quiet.
Right.
And for the most part, our dogs are pretty good at being like, oh, fine.
But somebody comes to the door, they do flip out. It's understandable.
Yeah.
I let them. But then they know within 30 seconds or a minute, okay, that's enough. We've heard. Thank you for telling me. We've heard enough. And we're going to move on.
Yep.
So I think we should probably also talk about separation anxiety. Because this is a big one for people. Mainly because of COVID. I think it's become a real buzzword, right? A COVID puppy.
Oh, I have a COVID puppy, and it's like...
So therefore, this is why she is the way she is, right? There's a lot of... I could talk about that and how I don't believe that needed to happen, but...
We had 2 COVID puppies.
And you would never know.
Nope.
So,
and we had all the time in the world to do all this stuff with them because we were in COVID.
Right. So we don't have to go into that part of our judginess around COVID puppies. But regardless of how they became, how they, the
behavior was
got
created
to being anxious when they're left alone, it is what it is, and we have to treat it.
Yep.
Right. So all dogs have to be comfortable being alone. And with this, and I know we've touched on this in previous episodes, with this generation of dog owners, right, say with millennials, right, they spend tremendous amounts of time with their dogs. They love them so much.
And money.
They have money to spend, and a lot of them don't have children. This is their first child, their fur baby, before they marry and have children. And some of them, this huge population is choosing not to have children, and their dogs become sort of surrogate children. So they treat them like a child, where they bring them everywhere with them. And they think that, this is the dream, right? This is bringing your dog to the cafe and bringing your dog everywhere. It's not healthy for most dogs, because we talk about 6 quality of life skills. Every dog has to be comfortable being alone, because they will be alone at someone in their life. And it's unfair to not give them those skills. So a lot of clients come to us with, saying they have separation anxiety. Yep. It's kind of a real umbrella term. Most of them don't have true separation anxiety as I would define it. It feels like it to the owner. I get it. But I would not define it as separation anxiety. I would describe it as a dog who is doesn't understand their role, doesn't feel comfortable being alone, but it's not so much
inadvertently being rewarded for the behavior.
Right. So I'm going to escalate my behavior because I don't want to be alone.
Yep.
I don't really call that separation anxiety, which probably doesn't make sense to people.
We've only had one dog with true separation anxiety, and we've dealt with a lot of people saying their dog has separation anxiety, and then we're like,
What are you talking about? Donut?
Donut was the only one that I was like puzzled, and it was a lot of like learning through both our parts of being like, where is this even coming from?
Yeah,
like,
why is he chewing in the bars of the crates? That's weird.
Yeah, like he had a very
Mr.
unique...
Confident, Mr. Chill, Mr. Obedient, great off switch, great impulse control.
Got left alone frequently as a puppy. It was
what's this chewing on the bars stuff? That's a weird behavior. That was true separation anxiety. And we talked about him in a previous episode, I think in season 1. I think we sort of came to the conclusion that was testosterone based. And we recommended that he be neutered. He was like 2 or 3 at the time. So it was appropriate for him to be neutered. We followed up with him for a while, but he hadn't been neutered yet. I should follow up with that owner and see if he did neuter him and see if that changed the behavior. But yes, that would be true, classic, in my opinion, separation anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Charlotte, who would screech and defecate all over her crate when her parents left. So we were like, oh, great. Whenever they come in, we're like, oh, God. Because they live in the house with us. They live they're in the kennel in the separate quarters, but they're still in the home with us.
And my room's above, so if when they do defecate, I smell it immediately.
Yeah, so we're like, oh, geez, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long for us to indicate to her, we don't do that. Go lay down.
Yep.
And she was like, oh.
Okay.
Oh.
This feels great.
I never thought it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And was great. dog, by the way, as was Donut.
Yeah.
I really adored them both.
Yeah. And when Donut, we were like, where did you get Donut from? So we
Donut
can
was a
recommend.
Cavapoo.
Yeah.
And Charlotte was a little, she looked like an island dog, if people know what I'm talking about, like a little short-haired mix, almost like a black-mouthed cur. She was like blonde with like a black muzzle. Almost like a miniature.
They should breed them like that.
Oh, she's fantastic. I loved that dog.
Yeah.
So smart. But if you let her screech and cry, when you leave.
Yep.
What people don't understand is that begets more of that behavior. So what we did right away is a verbal interrupter.
Yep.
No. Immediately.
Yep.
And then stepped out again. And then as soon as she started crying, step back in again. Or you step out and we go on the camera and speak through the microphone and the camera.
So they don't even get rewarded by seeing you.
Right. So she literally just needed a verbal interrupter. Like, we don't do that. And then she could self-regulate because she hasn't worked herself up into a frenzy, screeching and crying and then having to shit herself, right? We prevented that with that verbal interrupter. And she was able to self-regulate, settle down, and then have a positive experience being alone. And it was just over and over and over again for 3 weeks, multiple times a day, us doing that for her to learn that being alone, I don't have to act like that. And it actually feels better when I don't.
Yep.
So thank you for telling me that. Right. So most separation anxiety, I would think that we encounter falls into the Charlotte category.
Yeah. It's just got out of control and they've just fed onto each other to the point of the owner's like, I don't even know what to do anymore. Right. So we take her everywhere.
Right. Right. So we don't leave her alone.
Yeah. We don't
which
leave
then
her alone.
begets a dog who's more anxious when they're left alone because it's less frequent. It's less frequent. It's much more seldom. So yeah, we have to start doing that from a young age. And
we did a lot of that with Twiggy and Journey of just
even though we were home. And
Yeah,
we
we were
still
home.
do that because you could say COVID puppy, schmovid puppy. Tula would be considered a COVID puppy as far as we're home every day.
we're home every day. Yeah.
We work from home and we don't have a lot of visitors in general that come to the house. They do, but
And we do a lot with our dogs. We take them a lot of
they
different
go a lot of places. Yeah.
Especially when they're young because we want to work all these new muscles that they're figuring out. So we take Tula like all the time on the training walks with us. We do a lot. We do a crazy immersive. And you for the first like 2 weeks, especially when we get a new dog, you do attachment parenting. Like that is like your thing with the dogs is you do attachment parenting the first 2 weeks. And in that we build in a nap time schedule. This is the time you go in the bedroom and you go to sleep.
With the door closed while everybody else is in the other room. Right. So we can do, even when we work from home, and people are still working from home.
Yeah.
COVID or not COVID. We can still raise a puppy who's comfortable being alone by simply building a schedule that makes sense and having common sense. But again, a verbal interrupter is not going to make sense to a dog who doesn't understand what a verbal interrupter is. So everything starts with a foundation of understanding, right? Yep. They have to know what no means. They have to know what yes means so that we can discourage and encourage. So we can not reinforce and we can reinforce. So that's where we need to start. When they come to us, they're in such shock, strange place, strange people, that we, again, are at the advantage. When we do that verbal interrupter, that sharp no, they're like, oh, because they don't know us. Right?
I guess I can't do that with
They don't have a relationship with
that
us.
lady, that weird lady, And so then we have an advantage of being able to,
we don't have an
to
emotional
step in there and be like, which is why board and train works really well with us. And why doing group lessons, which we've figured out over time, that they go home and they work that muscle as soon as they go home. So it's really hard for them to work a new muscle when, we can do it in a group training session and they can cooperate with us. But as soon as I give that leash to the owner, it's much harder for the owner to be more consistent about that behavior.
For sure. So the other, probably the last thing we should talk about with anxiety is that we definitely see a correlation with anxious owners create anxious dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And this is not to make anybody feel bad about themselves.
No.
We all grapple with anxiety. It is it's a tough time in the world right now. It really is. It's been difficult. And, then you drill down to individual lives and what we're going through. We just came through COVID. We all have collective trauma around the world from COVID. So everybody is more anxious now than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
They just are. And some of us are better at regulating that anxiety, self-regulating, and keeping it sort of at a dull roar. And other people are not for a variety of reasons. But we definitely see that anxious owners create anxious dogs.
I have a good one.
Go ahead.
So I was working with my best friend's mom, and her dog, she's like, she won't walk with us. She's is scared of thunder and scared of fireworks, and now she doesn't go outside, and now she's starting to misbehave in the house. So, if you could work with her, I would appreciate it. When I was watching her for like a week, a couple years ago. And so I just started, she was a big Newfoundland. So I put the pinch collar on her because she was literally going to pull my arm off. And I used a shortened leash, not a flexi leash. And we just walked as far as I could get her with food, motivating food with her until we were able, I think it was like I only had a week with her. I think it was the third day I was able to walk her to the end of the street. And I videotaped it for her mom. And she was like, that is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I haven't been able to get her down the driveway. And I was like, it's really, she was just scared of the frogs in the bush. So something spooked her, and they never pushed her past that point. And so her world started getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I made it so there wasn't an option. We have to do this. I know you can do it. Here's some hot dogs. I'm going to give you a little bit of dopamine so we can get through this together. And then I also had Twiggy with me, who is a confident, intact female. So by the end of the week that I was with her, she was walking loose leash. We would not only go down to the end of the street, but we would go into the other streets and walk past dogs who were on electric fences, dogs that were attacking the fences. She wasn't reactive. She wasn't scared of anything. It was just getting past that little bit of point. So after the end of the week, I was like, okay, this is, these are the tools that I'm using for her. And this is a leash that you need. Like they needed I think it was a 4-foot leash because they had a huge flexi leash. And she would go to the end of the flexi leash and pull
Literally
them.
Could pull you
And she's
clean off
so
your feet
strong.
and drag you on your face.
Yeah.
And dump. Like a big dog like that is a real danger.
And they're older
Breaks
people.
bones commonly. Commonly.
And I think there was one incident where they had her on a flexi leash and she got spooked from the fireworks and pulled Tom right off the edge of these rocks. And he's an older guy, and he had like a twisted ankle. He almost broke his ankle and stuff. And I was like, and they're like, yeah, so we gave up after that.
Yeah. And as well you should, because it's not worth getting hurt over.
So I was like, I'm young. I can deal with it. Here are some tools that you need for her specifically because she is a big, strong dog. Anyways, we go on the walk a week later, and we're about to cross the street. And as we're crossing the street, that's where the dogs that have the electric fence come running out and bark like lunatics at the edge of the fence. And I've run into them 4 or 5 times at this point.
So they're going to stop.
So I know they're going to stop. I know that they're not going to go through the fence, and they're all bluster. So as soon as we start to cross the street, I see Karen go with the leash and pull it up. And I take her arm and I go, relax. Well, the dog's over there. They come running out, and I'm always afraid they're going to run and attack her. And if something happens, I don't know what I will do, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, we've already encountered them. She's not leash reactive. It's fine. Can we trust her for a little bit? So I was like, watch. And I took the leash, and I'm holding it with 2 fingers. And we walk across the street, and the dogs come running out of the house. And Ellie goes, and keeps walking. She goes, that's amazing. And I was like, a part of her anxiety that's coming out is because you are anxious. And when you tighten up that leash, she feels all of your anxiety, and it goes right down the leash, and she gets scared and runs home.
Right.
So you need to work on your anxiety. She's trained. You need to work on yourself and your anxiety and regulating your emotions. Let's worry about the problem until it happens. The problem isn't, I was like, I've walked her all across here. I've told Karen all the different dogs. I've had no problems with any of these dogs charging the fence, and she's not reactive. So it's fine. And now they walk Ellie everywhere.
Right. So, and, It's normal for someone to be scared of situations like that. That was an unusual situation in that you knew all the dogs and knew that the situation was safe.
I already tested the
You
waters.
wouldn't be telling her that if you didn't know
Yeah.
the neighborhood and the dogs and what is safe and what isn't. But yeah, I mean, that's an example of somebody who's super anxious, and it's just translating to the dog and then making the dog either more anxious or creating anxiety that wasn't there before.
And then, like, throughout the walk, she was telling me all these different examples of, like, things that would happen. And I was like, so that's you. She can do it.
Right.
So let's
Work
reevaluate.
on you
Yeah.
breathing through this.
Exactly.
And let the dog be the dog.
And bring somebody with you so they can see when you're getting anxious and when you're tightening up that leash or when you're wrapping that leash 50 times around your hand to make sure the dog doesn't go anywhere. The dog, you having your thumb in the loophole like this, your dog's not going anywhere.
Right.
Even if you have a big breed like this, it's you have the right tools, the right understanding, knowing your dog,
Yeah, so it's the owner's anxiety, and it comes from a place of, them being afraid for their dog or being overly worried about their dog's behaviors, right? Oh, well, he was whining in the crate, so I didn't know what to do, so I let him out because I thought he might be sick. Well, maybe he was just bored, right? So it's this over empathizing with your dog, I don't know what word, over connecting with them. And overthinking what they're, and maybe it's just garden variety. I'm bored, so I want you to let me out of the crate. There's nothing wrong. He's not actually having a stroke.
Do less.
He's just whining.
Do less.
So, we work a lot with the clients in getting them to just relax. And dogs are really very resilient little creatures. And we don't need to worry so much.
Nope.
We don't need to worry so much. We do see a lot of owners who hyper-focus on one or two aspects of the dog that we think are not terribly important, like hyper-fixate on how they're feeding them, right? They're going the whole raw route and getting very expensive raw food. And meanwhile, the dog has like this major behavior problem that's become dangerous. And they're not focusing on that.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, like all this energy
put the food aside
on
for a second.
Yeah, can we not work? Can we just throw some kibble in a bowl for now and let's focus on the stuff that's really important, like how your dog is completely out of control, or is resource guarding things in your house, or you can't sit on your own couch because your dog's like. So sometimes the hyperfixation on the wrong thing comes from a place of anxiety, I think, for people, and you really need a professional who can say, "Hey, listen, let's look at this from a different point of view." And, your dog is supposed to be a beacon of calmness and light and happiness in your life, not a lightning rod for your anxiety.
Yeah.
Not a depository for your anxiety. It's not fair to the dog, right? So we work on them getting their own house in order and separating their anxiety from the dog's potential anxiety.
Yeah,
right?
and a lot of the times, once again, going back to why we do board and train, is we can fully train the dog without the owner involvement whatsoever for those 3 weeks. Meanwhile, we're sending the owner, this is what we're working on with them. This is what's the paperwork you send?
They do a dog history report.
Dog history report, but there's like a paperwork you send right before we're about to go home.
We send a progress report halfway through and then a final report card.
No, it's like reinforcement.
Oh, the documents, yeah.
Yeah, so there's like all this document on like reinforcement and how this could be contributing behavior and stuff. And it's mainly like so the human can evaluate themselves
differently.
Inwardly. Like your dog's trained, but how is your environment and your reaction with the dog creating this behavior? And when your dog comes back home, how are we going to change your environment and your anxiety about whatever it is so your dog can be able to use all the skills from training and have a more balanced life with you.
Right. And it's easier for some people than others.
Yeah.
Some people are more motivated than others.
Yep.
So, it varies from client to client and dog to dog. But anxiety is like reactivity, absolutely fixable.
Yep.
And it is life-changing when you do it. You can't change who the dog is. If they're naturally kind of a nervous little guy, we're okay with that. We can manage that. But all the excess stuff that we've baked in by reinforcing all the wrong things, we can fix that. We can fix that. and your dog can live a happier, more calm and relaxed life, which in turn will make you happier and more relaxed. And the whole point of having the dog was for them to be, your stress reliever, not a stress creator. Mm-hmm. So that's what we hope for anxious dogs and dogs that have separation anxiety and all of that. You can hear our dogs barking right now. I don't know what they heard outside, but now they're barking upstairs. So do you have anything else to say on this subject?
I feel like we covered a lot.
Okay.
It's a tricky topic because it goes full circle. So it's like I felt like we just kept like re-dipping our feet into the same pot over and over again. But
right. So
that's what anxiety is. So.
Right. To summarize, anxiety, your anxious dog needs to be trained. Mm-hmm. And when they come into us really brittle and just completely sensitive to everything in the world, like an open sore, they can't, we're not going to go in there. We train each dog individually. So a dog that's super sensitive that comes in, we're going to treat them really carefully.
Caution and understanding that,
I'm not going to train a super afraid, fragile dog the same way I'm treating a dog that comes in that's 80 pounds, bouncing off the wall and scratching me in the face.
Yeah.
Those are two different approaches. Mm-hmm. So, and that seems obvious to a good trainer. It's kind of frighteningly normal for lots of trainers that we hear about.
Yeah.
That you just treat every dog the same.
Yeah.
A dog that comes in that's fragile needs a gentle touch, but also firm boundaries. It's just those firm boundaries are going to take a slightly different, they're going to look slightly different than they will for the firm boundaries for the doofus.
Yeah,
who's jumping all over me.
It's not funny. Yeah. It's not funny.
It's not funny. Exactly. Trying to convince a dog that things are not actually funny, that they think are funny.
Yeah. Those are the easiest, but the most frustrating clients. But that doesn't, not clients, dogs. But yeah. Anyways.
I mean, yeah, we can find satisfaction in every type of dog we train.
Well, I mean, I can't even say that because Ollie's here and he's an angel now. He was
a complete doofus.
Oh my gosh. I was like,
sweet, but just completely all over the place. And now he's starting to figure it out.
Yeah.
And actually, he is able to self-regulate.
It's a miracle.
What a coincidence.
No, I'm like, he's come so far in the last.
Yes, he's a good boy.
Yeah, it's just the beginning. I was like, you're not funny. Stop it.
We have to be so unfunny, like the unfun parent.
Yeah, and I hate it. Parent. We're like Nikki's the opposite, where you can be pretty goofy with her.
You can.
So it's like two very opposite.
They're really mirror images. Mirror images opposite or the same? I guess that's probably the same. Opposite images, contrasting.
Yin and
dogs.
yang. There you go.
Yeah. All right, so we decided to record this at the last second because we're super busy tomorrow, which we normally record on Sundays. Today it's Saturday afternoon, but since everybody seems to have plans tomorrow, at the last minute, we decided to record today.
Yep.
So I did not really have a chance to find I Bet I Can Make You Cry story. So you suggested that I take one for my own life.
Yeah. So
here we go. Hey, Soph.
Hey.
Bet I can make you cry.
You definitely will, so bet. Definitely gonna. I love this story.
All right, so this is the story of Divot, a little stray dog I found, 27 years ago, maybe. It was before you were born. You're going to be 25. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so 27, 28 years ago. Long time ago. I was single at the time. I had a couple of dogs of my own. And I decided to go golfing at this little tiny par 3 down the road from where I was living at the time. And I pulled into the parking lot, and there was on the grassy knoll of the parking lot, there was what looked like a pile of fur. And I was like, what the heck is that? And as I drove by slowly, the pile of fur lifted her head up and looked at me, and I went, oh crap, that's a dog. She was little, maybe 20, 25 pounds. She looked like a hound mix of some sort, and had an absolutely scorching case of demodectic mange, which is when the hair falls out, right? It's actually a parasite on the skin. And she was open sores where she had no hair. and over 50% of her body did not have hair. And she was a grooming dog, a dog with hair, so that the hair she did have was totally matted. So it was like hanging off in clumps. And then there were these giant patches of baldness that had open sores on them. And I was probably your age at that time. So maybe it was 30 years ago. So I marched immediately inside to the manager of the golf course. And I said, what the actual fuck is going on here? And he, long story short, explained to me that this dog had been living in the woods off the golf course for 4 years. And no one's been able to catch her. And it's at the point now where she's so sick and she's making the clients, the people who come to use the golf course, very uncomfortable that they're going to, at this point, they're going to put her down. They're going to shoot her at some point because nobody can catch her. The dog warden knows about her. And this is what's going to have to be like. We can't have her here anymore. It's ridiculous. She's suffering. So I said, all right, give me a chance to try to catch her. And he's like, you're not going to catch her. Everyone, like so many people have come here. I did end up finding out that an older woman had set up a have-a-heart trap, and like an old woman, like in her 70s, kind of a crazy old cat lady. And she had set up a have-a-heart trap and trapped her and brought her to a vet, had her vaccinated, put on a tick collar, one of those heavy-duty tick collars. They were called Prevent ticks. They were like the first generation of really heavy-duty, full of chemical tick collars, put it on her, and then drove her back to the golf course and released her.
Like, what the freaking...
So the only way I can explain that is she was a crazy cat lady, and you actually do that for feral cats.
Yeah, feral cats do
you
it, but
trap
not
them,
for a dog.
you spay and neuter them, you vaccinate them, and then you usually return them to the barn or the woods where they live, and they can live out their life because they're not rehabable at that point. They can't live in homes. So that is sometimes a practice for feral cats, but never for feral dogs. It's a different story. I didn't know if she was feral. I know she'd been living there for 4 years. I know she was unhandleable and a real escape artist, and that nobody could catch her since then because now she'd really been clued in. Mm-hmm. She was going nowhere near any traps. Mm-hmm. And no one could get within 20 feet of her. Mm-hmm. She was just so hypervigilant. She would just run off. So I spoke to the dog warden. The dog warden confirmed that whole story to me. And he said, at this point, we're going to have to dart her. And she'll never survive that because she's just a little tiny thing. She's skinny. She had a belly full of worms. So she just looked like a horrible mess. So I said, give me a few days. I went to, there are dogs again. I wonder if somebody's at the door.
Sounds like Dad.
So I said, give me a few days. I went to my vet who I always have wonderful vets, and explained the story to him. And he gave me a shit ton of tranquilizers to put in her food. And he said, the problem is that as soon as you do that, her adrenaline's going to go through the roof because she's going to feel off. So her adrenaline's going to fight the tranquilizer. So you're going to have to find the amount to give her that is going to actually tranquilize her and not kill her. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that amount is going to be. So after 4 or 5 days of me putting in cat food, the pills, she would scarf it down when I stepped away. And I would lay on the grass and I couldn't get anywhere near her. And she would just run away and that would be the end of it. So I kept giving her more and more and more. And at the last dose my vet gave me, he said, she's never going to survive this, just letting you know. But at this point, what choice do we have? Yep. So he's like, here you go. Try one more time. So I put this massive dose of tranquilizers in a cat dish, a cat food. She ate it. And she laid down maybe about 20, 30 feet from me and did start to look a little sleepy. But she still had her head up. And so what I did was, this is all during business hours. There's literally people pulling into the parking lot and parking and getting their golf clubs out. And here's this crazy 25-year-old on her stomach, belly crawling quietly over to this dog.
Only you, Mom. Only you.
Well, not me. There's lots of crazy dog
Well,
people.
I know, but anyways, sorry.
It didn't bother me. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel foolish at all. So, it took, I don't know. It's so long ago. I don't know how long. It took a long time for me to belly crawl over to her. And she was out of it enough for me to just get my finger under her chin and scratch a little bit. And she didn't freak out. So I moved ever so slowly, inching towards her little, and I was able to hook my finger on the very strong flea collar she had on. And once I had the hook on, I just hung her. I just picked her up in the air because that was the only thing I could do. And she immediately started flipping out, trying to bite me and shitting all over everything. And I yelled to the manager then came out when he heard the commotion. I said, get me a towel or something. And he came out with a tablecloth from one of the tables in the restaurant and gave it to me. And I threw it over top of her. And I put her in a crate in the back of my car. And I believe it was late. It was later in the day. It was probably 5 or 6 o'clock at night. So the vet was closed. We didn't have emergency vets back then. There was one in White Plains, and it was like, those not paying emergency vet bills. So I put her in the car, and I remember smelling her on the drive home. It smelled like a dead dog. I mean, her skin was so festered and disgusting. So I brought her home. I had my own kennel at the time, a small kennel. And I brought her in the kennel, and I just put her in a cage. And, she's totally traumatized. And I just figured, well, at least she's off the street. I'll probably never be able to handle her. She's probably feral. But at least she's off the street. So over the course of the next few days, my friend Beth came over to see her. And, I would just sit outside her cage and hand feed her. And within a couple of days, she allowed me to touch her and even pet her. And I was like, oh, this dog isn't feral. It's not feral at all. And so she began to trust me. And at that point, I was able to pick her up, put her on a grooming table, and shave all those disgusting mats off of her. I was able to worm her, and she had this pile of spaghetti worms. So disgusting. We were able to then take her to the vet, have her vetted, and then he gave me this special medication soap that I had to bathe her, I think, like every other day for weeks, 6 or 8 weeks, to kill the mange. And I started taking pictures of her progression. I got to find them. I think they're in that cabinet.
They're in that cabinet, and it's all like Polaroids of like day 17, day whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see her skin healing, and her hair never grew back in most of the places that were missing. And she was hella ugly. She had this massive underbite. She was like this little sort of Benji, tall, skinny Benji sort of terrier mix with this massive underbite and these rotting teeth. And hair that never grew back in spots. She had to wear a sweater, 9 months out of the year. We would have every week we would change it. It was like sweater day, new sweater day. And she turned out to be the most amazing dog. Of course, they always do when you do that for them. When I first decided that she could transition to my home out of the kennel but live in the house with me, she was in, for a week or so. And at one point I decided, because I didn't leash my dogs, I just let them out in the backyard. We were far from the road, but it wasn't fenced. And I decided, I'm going to let her out with the group and see what happens. If she runs off, I've done everything I can do. If she chooses to leave at this point, I don't know I can't help her, So I let her out with the group, and I was on a deck, and you had to run down the stairs for them to poop and pee. And the group did their business and came back up the stairs, and she didn't come. And I was like, oh, God, I think I made a mistake. So I went down the stairs, and I was calling and calling and calling. It was like dusk in November. And I heard rustling in this pile of leaves. And I turned around, and she had buried herself in a pile of leaves because she thought I was done with her. And she was going to live outside again for the rest of her life. So she had buried herself in leaves because it was cold out. And I said, what are you doing? And she looked up, and I said, you don't have to be out here. You can come inside with me. And she looked at me and went, I can? I said, yeah. And she jumped up and ran up those stairs. And that dog never left my side again. I never had to leash her. She never let me out of her sight when we were out of the house. She just ended up being this amazing dog. Ugly as sin. She probably could have competed for the ugliest dog. She didn't sit. I never saw the dog sit. It took her a full year to sit because she was so hypervigilant. She would curl up in a ball in a corner, but she would never sit. Like, if you're a stray dog, you don't really sit. Think about it. You're always on the run. You're either hiding or you're on your feet because you never know what's going to happen to you. So I thought maybe something was wrong with her hips, that she couldn't sit. I remember the day she sat for the first time. I took a picture of it. I still have it somewhere. And it's this ugly dog with this, I think she has a red and white sweater on. And she has this skinny little whiptail, no hair on it. And she's sitting. And, I would be the only one who would know what the significance of that picture. So I think I had her for 4 years. We think she was around 4-ish when I got her. And I had her for about 4 years. And one day I changed her sweater. Like I said, I did it once a week, put a clean one on. And her belly seemed really distended. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So I took her to the vet, and the vet said, oh, she's riddled with cancer. Riddled. Like she's in bad shape. I mean, it's one of those fast-growing, came out of nowhere. It makes sense because she lived on a golf course, so her exposure to the chemicals on the golf course probably what did it. Mm-hmm. So I chose to put her down like the next day. I took her home. We had one last night together, and then I took her back, and I put her down. And it's just one of those things, It's just one of those dogs who changes you. She didn't really do anything. She wasn't like an obedience champion. She wasn't attractive. She just was one of those dogs who you never forget. Mm-hmm. We still talk about the Dibadoo. Mm-hmm. She was a good dog.
You had her for 4 years?
Yeah, I was, it's just one of those things where you can tell yourself that you gave her a good life. Like you took her from a horrible situation and you gave her a good life. And, she went over the Rainbow Bridge. So.
Told you it would make me cry. This is a good story.
She was a great dog. She really was. I'll see her again someday, I'm sure.
Yeah. All
right. So that's it for this episode. I can make you cry. My God. I'd rather read stories. I know. Everybody who's listening can relate to the stories like this when you lose. I've lost a lot of dogs.
Yeah.
But they all mean something to me. Mm-hmm. But, especially the ones that you're able to actually give a good life. Not the dogs who are born here, who never know anything but luxury and love and affection and safety. But when you're able to take a dog who doesn't know any of that and show it to them, and they show this amazing ability to appreciate, to express their gratitude to you, it always blows me away. Me away.
That's how I feel about Vivian,
Yep.
Like, I wouldn't say Vivian is very obedient, but she does it because she's like...
That dog will do anything for me.
Yeah,
because
she's indebted to you.
Yeah, she just came from a sketchy background, and yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway. All right, we need to wind it up. I need a tissue.
Pull it together. Where is the tissue box? Where is it? We didn't cry the last, 3.
I know. Yeah. All right. So that's it for episode 5 in the can. Mm-hmm. Ba-boom. So we'll see everybody next time. Mm-hmm. I think next week we have a guest.
Yeah.
Next week we have our vet, Dr. Paul Kleinbard, coming.
Yep.
Woo! That's going to be exciting. So until then, guys, we will see you next time on Dog for Thought. Bye. Dog for Thought is written and hosted by me, Sarah Brown, co-hosted by Sophie Brown, produced, edited, and original music by Jacob Brown. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.